Hello, my friends. Leo Babalta from Zen Habits here. So happy to be here with you. In this video, we're going to talk about the art of saying no to create space for what matters. Let's break that down a little bit because I think this is really important. I think a lot of times we can feel like our calendar or our task list is running us. Our inboxes, they control us instead of the other way around. These are supposed to be tools for running our lives, and yet our lives are being run by the tools. Another constant thing that you might notice in your life is that you're constantly saying yes to things you might not really want to do. Maybe it sounds okay in the moment when you say yes, and then later you're like, why did I say yes to that? And what happens is that we then might have no time for what truly matters. Now, what is it that truly matters? Well, that's another really good question to ask yourself. But for me, it might be things like, time for myself, out in nature, exercise, being active, solitude, and some space for myself for replenishment. It might be time with my loved ones, going on a date with my wife or hanging out with my kids, or doing a call with my mom. So these are things that really matter to me. And then, of course, in my work life, there are certain projects that I think are really important, but tend to have less space than I would like because I might be saying yes to a whole bunch of other things. So what is that like in your life? Are you full up? Not having space for the things that actually matter. Do you sometimes feel like you don't have any air to breathe because of how busy you are? Do you feel overwhelmed and drained? And if so, then this video is for you. So let's imagine another possibility where your schedule reflects your actual priorities, what's actually important to you, not just what everybody else is asking of you. A life where you feel more energized, focused, more in control. It's not about like being self-centered and selfish, but it's more about mastering the incredibly powerful skill of saying no so that you can finally say yes to the life that you deserve. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's dive in. So there's a few things that I want to talk about. First is why we can't say no and how that leads to us having this drowning effect in our lives. So first of all, saying yes is more socially acceptable. It feels, or at least it feels that way. We can often feel like saying no is like, oh, am I rejecting the person? Am I going to make them feel bad? There's a lot of fears and doubts that come with saying no. And saying yes, oh, that makes the other person happy. I'm doing what they want. Their lives are going to be better. And so I'm fostering relationships. And, so our default tends to be that because it's a path of least resistance. We are saying yes. It's easier than saying no, which can bring a lot of, fear and self-doubt. I'm like, oh, am I being a bad coworker? Or am I being a bad employee or a bad teammate or a bad, spouse or whatever it is? Um, and another related idea to why we can't say no is FOMO. We want to say yes to a lot of things because we're afraid if we say no, we're like, I should be there. I should be doing all of these things. I should be taking these opportunities. And I actually think it's really beautiful when we start to say yes to a lot of opportunities if we've been saying no to everything. And it's just like, nope, I'm going to stay in my comfort zone. I'm going to like hide in my shell and not actually put myself out there. In that case, saying yes to things is a really beautiful thing. Taking the opportunities that come our way, going through the doors. But that's not everybody's problem. For some people, they say yes too much. And so if that's you, that's what we're talking about here. So we're afraid of missing out. Like, should I be going to this party or this concert or this, cool networking opportunity or a conference and if we say yes to all of these things, I'm going to go on a trip with my friends and then one with my partner and then one with my family, and then all of a sudden my schedule is just packed. And that's because we're afraid we might be missing out on some key opportunities, or maybe other people are having fun and we're not. And we don't want to be kind of like left behind. So there's lots of fears like that that we could categorize under FOMO, although it's, I think, a whole bundle of fears. And what happens is that we become overwhelmed because we have constant commitments from saying yes, constant, obligations that we need to go through. And that leads to burnout. That leads to a diffused focus. We're kind of scattered. It leads to us not being excited about the things that we've said yes to. Maybe feeling more obligation or burden rather than like, oh, I can't wait to do this. If you're like, I can't wait to do all of these things, great. But a lot of times they can lead to, I have to go do these things, right? And that sucks for you. It might suck for the other people that you've said yes to, right? They're like, oh God, they said they wanted to help me here. And they're just like, you know, look, they seem resentful, right? Um, and so, how do we start to shift the tide here? So, first of all, what we might do is a little bit of an inventory. Where am I spending my time? Am I putting a lot of my efforts on these other things that I've said yes to, and less on the things that actually want to do it? Are there things that are kind of sucking my time? Maybe there are a few different things that I might notice looking back on my last couple of weeks on my calendar, on how I've actually spent my time. I might notice like, oh, there's a lot of certain obligations or certain people that are pulling my time away, and I just have no time left, right? And so it's really good to identify that. It's work things, it's social things, personal requests that just kind of slowly drain us. Okay, so let's imagine we wanted to reclaim our time, reclaim that calendar, right? And so what we want to do is start to visualize what it could look like. How do we actually want it to look like? Imagine that you could have a blank slate and you could start over, and then you could start to put in to your calendar, into your life, the things that actually matter. What would you want to put there? Would you want to have more time for exercise, or cooking for yourself, or being outdoors, or solitude, or rest? Would you want to have more time for certain loved ones, or certain relationships at work, for certain hobbies? Would you want to have time for certain projects? Maybe there's one project that's been calling you and you want to make some time for that. And then start to visualize what that could look like. I want to do that project, 5 days a week, 8 a.m. Or I want to do this thing as hobby every Saturday. And I want to do this other thing with my spouse every Sunday. And so you can start to like visualize what that could look like and start to block it off. Imagine you had a blank slate and you get to block it off. Now, would you also want some time for other things, certain work obligations that actually matter to you, certain personal obligations that actually you're like, yes, I actually would love this to stay there in my life. And so start to put those in place as well. And so we can start to create a new shape to our lives through this kind of an exercise. Now, from where the current assessment of where things are right now to where we want to go, there's a gap, right? We want to kind of bridge that gap. And what we can do is imagine that it could be done slowly. It doesn't have to be today. I don't need to like completely get there. And often if we have this really cool vision of what we would like our lives to be like, we can actually be really impatient to get there. But I want to give you the opportunity to slowly create this for yourself. And then another thing that I want to say is sometimes people just don't even try at all. There's one group which might be really impatient. I want to get there right away. And another one is just like, I can't even imagine that it's possible. And for that group, I would say, again, what if you could just start to move slowly in that direction? What's one thing you can do? One or two or three things you can do to start to make that happen? We're going to talk about that next. So, If there are things you have identified that are sucking your time that you want to start to move out, or at least lessen, reduce, um, what are some small steps you can do to actually make that happen? And imagine that you now have a magical power of being able to graciously say no. And imagine that the other person isn't going to feel bad. Okay, so that's just an exercise. What then would you do? Would you say no to certain things? I know from my life, I years ago when I did this exercise, I was doing a lot of extracurricular things that weren't related to my work, weren't with my actual family, but were kind of related to my family. Like I had said yes to coaching one of my kids' soccer teams, which I really did enjoy, and I'm glad I did it, but it was taking a lot of time. I said yes to being on the Parent Teacher Association of one of my kids' schools. I thought that was cool, but I wasn't actually spending time with my actual kid. I was just involved with the school and a bunch of other parents and teachers. So that wasn't really worth it. And so I'm like, I started to do an inventory of all these things, and I'm like, what if I could get out of some of these? And there were certain things that worked too. What if I could say no to this thing? All of a sudden, I would start to have more space for these other things. And so I started to say no. For some of them, it was really easy. I just sent an email, right? Like, hey, at the end of the season, I'm going to be pulling out of coaching. I just wanted to let you know I will, of course, finish my current obligation, but after that, that's the end. Um, I'm withdrawing from the Parent Teacher Association. Simple email for some of these. For others, I wanted to have a conversation, so I would go and talk to my boss or other people who I had a closer relationship and actually have a conversation there. But they were very, simple steps. Send an email, have a conversation. And it wasn't that I had to end it right now. Maybe I wanted to, give them some time. So, in a couple of months, I would like to stop doing this. In a few weeks, I would actually like to withdraw from this. And so I identified these things, and I had four different conversations or emails that I had to do, and all of a sudden I was like 80% there. And I wasn't 100%, but four emails and conversations. So sent a couple of emails, had a couple of conversations. It took me a day and I was 80% there. Now, that's not always going to be that easy for you, but imagine that you could start to take that. What's one thing that you could do that might reclaim half an hour a week? Or maybe it's an hour a week, and all of a sudden, a little more breathing space. And then you can start to create longer term changes. So let's talk about graciously saying no. This is really tough. This is a skill that has to be practiced. It was not something that I was good at. You might be a yes person, a people pleaser, someone who does not like to reject others. And so if that's you, then what we want to do is start to practice, and we want to do it in a tactful way. Sometimes people can kind of swing way off to the other side and they're like, screw that. I am not doing that anymore. Stop asking me. And so they're really harsh. I actually did that with a couple of relationships and later regretted it and then apologized and started to take that as a lesson. Like, actually, I was kind of not cool the way that I said no to this person. I was a little bit rude about it. So I had to like refine my art. But for you, you might start to think about how could you say no in a way that's graceful. For example, and you might even like start to create a little script for yourself and just be like, my relationship with you, this is an example script, right? My relationship with you is really important. And so I care about, our relationship, but this thing that I've said yes to, it's just not something I can do. My plate is too full. And I really need to clear up some space for other things that I just don't have time for right now, or just to have some breathing room, and I'm overloaded. And I apologize for saying yes to something that, I don't have the time for. So that's on me and it's my mistake. And I apologize for that. And if there's anything that I can do to clean that up, I'm happy to do that. But I just can't keep going with this. So whatever that is, right? I can't keep going with, serving on this board or, volunteering every weekend. And by the way, I have actually really loved it. It's something that has been important to me, but I just don't have the time, and I have to say no to a few things. You're one of this is one of them, but I still want to continue like our relationship, and I hope like we can, you know, continue to like have an ongoing like part of each other's lives, something like that, right? So what you can see here is you're really reaffirming that this person is important to you. You're reaffirming that you're grateful for the opportunity that you've gotten, that you've enjoyed it, that this has been important to you. Maybe it was a learning experience. Maybe there was something about it that really helped you to feel moved in the way that you were able to serve. Whatever it is, you're saying no, not because this person sucks or that you don't care about them or not because of the thing that you're doing sucks, but it's just because you need to reclaim some time. You need to start saying no to some things. You overcommitted and that was a mistake. You're willing to like do this in a way that doesn't impact them, or impacts them minimally. Maybe you'll help find a replacement if you're quitting a job or an important role. Maybe you'll give them some leeway, like a month or two. Maybe you'll help, you know, um, transition. So there's different things that you can do to like really soften the impact, but it will have an impact. So we start to create a script. Now, the script that I've just said isn't necessarily the script that you want to do. So you might think about the script that works for you, but then you can kind of rehearse it in your own mind. I wouldn't over rehearse it. There's a degree of trust we can develop in just like going into the conversation, doing our best. But sometimes if we're feeling really tense, we can actually rehearse it in our heads just a little bit. Just be like, okay, this is how it would go. And what if they like, said, no, I need you. What would I do then? And so in that case, you might rehearse it a little bit, but what you really want to do is stand up for your boundaries. Not in a way that's harsh, but just be like, I totally get that you really need me. And like, I apologize for not being able to be there for you when you need me, but I just need to also honor my own needs, not just everybody else's. And so your needs are really important and I care about them, but my needs have been going in the back burner for a long time. And so I just really need to honor those. And so I get that you need me, but I'm just going to have to say no. And like, I hope there's no hard feelings. Um, so sometimes no is not an actual option for some people. And so what you can do is to start to find an alternative solution. If no isn't feasible, what's something that's kind of a middle ground? Maybe I can reduce my hours. Maybe I can team up with someone else and take some of the workload off of me. Maybe we can do this project in a way that takes less time. Maybe we can outsource some of it. Maybe, so there's ways we can get creative so that this thing doesn't have to be a complete no, but we can find another solution that doesn't take up as much time, and that way I can reclaim some of that. What I also want you to do, what I want to advocate for is trusting the other person. Sometimes when we're like, oh, I can't say no to this person because they're going to feel upset or they're going to feel hurt or they're going to feel like, they're not going to be able to handle it without me. I'm going to just be leaving them in the lurch. What if we could trust the other person to 1000% be able to handle themselves? I think sometimes when we're afraid to say no, we're actually afraid that the other person can't handle themselves. So, for example, maybe we're afraid they can't handle this job without me helping them. Well, what if this is actually what they needed was me to withdraw so that they could learn to handle themselves without me? Maybe this is actually a great growth opportunity for them. Maybe they can already handle it without me, and I just have been kind of fooling myself. So I'm trusting them to be able to handle the job, but I can also trust them to be able to handle their emotions of rejection. Maybe they're going to be upset. Sure, but can they handle that? Can they handle feeling a bit upset or hurt? And the truth is, yes, people can handle that. Maybe it doesn't seem like it because they're like, I'm upset at you and I don't want to talk to you anymore. Sure. That doesn't always feel good. That can be uncomfortable, but maybe they just need to be able to process that and deal with it. And eventually they will adjust to the new reality that you care about them, but you're not going to be doing this thing. And then they can kind of cope with that in the way that they need to. It isn't your job to help someone cope with their emotions. That said, you can take responsibility for your impact without needing to be like, they can't cope with their emotions. I need to help them. You can care about their emotions, but also just trust that they can handle them. And so this is actually underlying a big part of the fear of saying no to people, is that we're afraid they can't handle that. But what if we could trust that they could have their reaction, that they can handle what's on the other side of that, and that then we can handle the discomfort that comes up for us of saying no. One last thing is, if you are afraid of missing out, the FOMO kind of thing of saying no, what I really want to encourage you to do is to not focus so much on the fear of missing out. Yes, there are some things you will miss out on, but what are you also saying yes to by saying no to this opportunity? By saying no to this trip, this concert, this volunteering opportunity, what are you actually saying yes to? And is that something that really matters to you? And if that's the case, then I would really encourage you to focus on that. Okay, that's what I've got for you. Obviously a deep topic. If you have more questions about this, please post in the comments. I love the comments that you guys have been posting. It matters a lot to me. I love creating this content for you. So if this was helpful, give me a thumbs up. It really helps. Subscribe. Every subscriber is appreciated. We're building a community here in YouTube for people who are interested in Zen habits. Share this with others who could use some Zen habits in their lives. And I hope that you actually can create some space for what matters to you. Thanks, my friends.